Flowin Volvoruin. Anyone who's particularly adept at the Welsh language, please do pull me up if my pronunciations or translations are wrong, but I believe I've got that right. I think it means a joyous feast of the maidens. Or indeed, as this particular celebration on the Wheel of the Year is known, Imbolc. A happy Imbolc to you. Or if you're particularly old school Wicca, a happy Candlemas to you, as the celebration was known before the, shall we say, Celtic authenticity development of the 1970s. With it still being so bitingly cold, and darkness still in dominance until the spring equinox, when darkness and light will be in balance, and the scales will tip in light's favour, one could wonder what on earth we have to celebrate. But understand, for our ancestors, this was a time of great optimism, and indeed great relief, as your sheep would start to lactate and bring forth ewes, and therefore, of course, bring forth milk. Well, silly me, I did already say it, they were lactating. But you can very well imagine it was very difficult for them to keep milk and butter from starting to curdle in those days throughout the long winter time. Also, with days getting that little bit longer and that little bit lighter, well, the nourishment from the sun is starting to reach the earth, and seeds and fruits are starting to germinate from the ground, pushing themselves up from the earth and upon the trees. We indeed get the first signs that spring is on the way. Now, one particular deity for whom this time is particularly sacred is the goddess Brighid, or Brigantia, or Breed, or Bride, or Bridey. She's known by many various names, although she was celebrated on the continent of Europe, in ancient Britain, but her cult was particularly strong in Ireland. Now, the reason this deity is particularly so beloved, Imbolc's her feast day, by the way, she was so beloved because she had a great many matronages over a great many things. She was the goddess of poetry, smithcraft, healing, childbirth, midwifery. Though one can understand she was both gentle and compassionate, but also no nonsense as well. I mean, you don't heft a great big hammer and slam it down onto the forge in the blistering heat of a smithy if you're a bit of a shrinking violet. So she was tough and no nonsense. You know, she gentle, but she took no poo-poo. One story about her that illustrates this is the tale of the two lepers. As the story goes, these two lepers were wandering around the country when they happened upon one of Brigid's healing springs, with the goddess herself in attendance. The goddess welcomed them with compassion and gave each of them the opportunity to be healed from their afflictions. Her instructions were that each one turn must take his fellow into the springs and wash him. The washed one would then be healed, and they would swap places. The washer would be the washed. Now, one of the lepers eagerly brought his friend over and washed him clean, and was delighted to see that his fellow was healed completely and restored to health and vigour. But this leper who had been healed, he looked upon his fellow with utter disgust. Oh, that's my little dog, Pudding. I might introduce you to him shortly. He looked upon his fellow with absolute disgust, and there was no... oh, are you coming up, Pudding? Yes. Say hello to Pudding, everybody. Pudding, say hello to everybody. He looked upon his fellow with absolute disgust and refused to have anything to do with him, refused to put his hands upon him to heal him. Brighid was enraged. "Right, having you," she said, clapped her hands and restored his leprosy to him and threw him from the healing well. She then went to the leper who had healed his friend and washed him herself, healing him completely, restoring him to health and sending him on his way in peace. Now, I was going to show you my little shrine here to Brighid. I feel a bit bad for doing it now because Pudding's just settled into my lap. Oh, come along, Pudding. Got a tickly tummy? Oh yes, yes, you certainly do. Come along. Come along. We're going to have a look at the shrine now, aren't we? Yes, we're going to have a look at Brigid's shrine. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Oh, you're off, are you? Oh, very well. Let's see if I can dislodge my camera. I do apologise, I'm doing this very much on the fly. Ah yes, here we are. Come along then. Right. Yes, as you can see with this particular shrine setup, we have Brighid herself. And just look at that. Whoever made this must have been touched with the hand of Brighid. They do have such talent. As you can see, Brigid's holding, not sure if you can see that too clearly, but she's holding a flame, denoting her mastery over fire. Now down here, there's her symbol, Brigid's cross. Oh, she certainly was cross with that leper, wasn't she? And various symbols of her matronages, smithcraft, childbirth, and I think there's some berries there. Also the hearth and home. But if you put all their matronages down there, I doubt there'd be much room for anything. But what this clever so-and-so, this talented so-and-so who created this, has gone and done, is put spaces for 3 tea lights to denote the fact that Brighid is triune in nature, is a triple goddess. Right. And down here, purpose for this bowl of water, I put a little essential oil in there, frankincense, for its symbolism with the sun. Brigid's also a solar deity, and that gave it buoyancy for the tea lights to float. 19 tea lights there. There's a little bit of a story behind that also. You see, in a place called Kildara in Ireland, there's an ancient temple to the goddess Brighid, where 19 priestesses would attend a perpetual flame in her honour as a fire goddess. It was said each of the priestesses would attend the flame for one night each, and on the 20th night the goddess herself would come and watch over the flame so that it could burn eternal. Now, when Christianity came to Ireland, Brighid was so beloved of the people that they couldn't seem to end their devotion to her. If they were going to go about it by labelling this beloved deity a demon, then that would run counterproductive to the mission in Ireland. So instead, they converted her into a saint, Saint Brighid, and her temple in Kildare became an abbey, and the 19 priestesses became 19 nuns, and so the flame continued until the time of Henry VIII, where Henry had the abbey closed down and the flame snuffed out. And sadly it remained snuffed out until, happily, it was relit in the 1990s, and the Sisters of Kildare attend it, I understand, to this day. So, with these particular tea lights, during my particular celebrations, I'll light one of them at a time, and give honour to one of Brighid's attributes and patronages: the compassion of healing, smithcraft, poetry, and so on and etc., until I've lit all 19. I want to leave you now with a story from, let me just fetch it up here, with another story about Brighid from the rather excellent book Druidcraft by Philip Carr Gomm. If you haven't had a look at it, please do. It's a really excellent book. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. The Life of Brighid by Philip Carr Gomm. The great father god of the Druids in Ireland was known as the Dagda. He was a mighty being who possessed a vast cauldron that was so big that whole worlds could be stirred within its depths. To stir the cauldron, he carved a great spoon, and a sport among the gods was for them to lie together in their father's spoon, while he stirred it around and round the swirling mass of atoms we call the cosmos. One night, when lightning streaked the sky and all the heavens seemed to open, the Dagda's daughter was born into the world. No one knew the name of her mother. Perhaps she was the night sky itself, or the moon that shines so brightly in our heavens. Perhaps she was the goddess of the forest and the deep earth. Perhaps she came from the constellation of the Great Bear in the northern skies, though some whisper she was Anu, Danu, or Dana, or the Tuatha De Danu. In reality, we shall never know her name. But out of her womb was born a child of timeless beauty, with flowing golden hair and hazel eyes, with strong arms and limbs, and a spirit that was both fiery and as deep as the deepest of oceans. The Dagda knew at once her name. "We shall call you Brighid," he declared to the little girl who was born on the earth, as the first snowdrops began to appear across the land. With every day that passed, her strength and beauty grew tenfold, until at last she stood before her father as a young woman, a young goddess. "Let me go into the world now, father," she said to the Dagda. "Look at my brothers. Already they are at work. Ogma, inspiring the writings of men and women. Angus, opening their hearts to love. Dawn, guiding them to death and to the blessed isles beyond. I too would inspire the hearts of those on earth." Her father replied, "Your brother Ogham has taught the art of writing and literature, but you must teach them how to go deeper with their words, how to find the song of their souls. You must teach them how to sing from their hearts. You must introduce the art of poetry to the world." This pleased Brighid, for she liked nothing more than giving melody to the spoken word, rhyming and scanning words until they soared and danced in the air before her. But she wanted more. She knew she could give more. "Give me more tasks to perform, father," she begged. "Very well," he replied. "Teach them how to give birth, not only to poetry, but also to themselves. Teach them the arts of the midwife, Show them how to give birth not only to the beauty of language, but also to the beauty of their own bodies. Become the goddess of birth, just as your brother Dawn is the god of death." "Oh, but I want more," cried Brighid. "I can do more, for there is fire in my limbs and my heart. I would help the world and its creatures." "If you would help them," said the Dagda, "then tend to their ills, care for their sicknesses, for their bodies and souls. Become the goddess of healing." And so it was that Brighid became the goddess of poets, midwives, and healers. One day, as she went about the earth, touching people's hearts with her inspiration and their bodies with her healing, she came across the great smith god, Govnai. She stood at the door of his forge, entranced by the flames that raged in his furnace. With each beat of the great hammer on the sword that he was forging, Brighid felt a surge in her heart. She too longed to wield a hammer and forge beauty upon the anvil. Govnai turned to the door, and seeing her there, smiled. He held out his hammer towards her, saying, "Goddess of the healing well, you are goddess of the scorching fire too. No healing may come without fire of life, no beauty without the well of suffering and rebirth. Come, take my hammer, forge the sword, make new the world each day." With that, the goddess took the hammer and became the goddess of all smiths. She would forge iron as well as poems and new births. She would inspire craftsmen as well as poets and midwives and healers. And so it was, in the year 455 AD, at Folkhart in County Down Island, that the midwife, delivering the baby girl of the druid Dubtach and his wife, called upon the blessings of the goddess Brighid. She picked up the newborn child and, praising Brighid, passed the baby 3 times over the hearth fire, while Dubtach and his wife watched in joy. Then, 3 times around the fire, she carried the child again, calling upon Brighid in thanks and praise. Finally, she brought the little one to her parents, who, kissing the child, nodded in agreement, as Dubtach held a bowl of water drawn from the goddess Brighid's holy well close by. The midwife dipped her fingers into the bowl 9 times, and each time she called upon blessings for the child. They named the girl Brighid, in token of their thanks to the goddess, who had given such health and beauty. Some said that Dubtach fed her the milk of the cows from the other world. They saw him disappearing into the forest at night with empty pails, and some, who followed him, reported that they saw him entering a clearing where stood a great cow in a moonlight shaft. Dubtach milked this cow until both buckets overflowed. Then, patting the cow's side, he would leave the clearing, and it would simply disappear. As the child grew, the new faith of Christianity spread through the land, until Brighid herself became a Christian, eventually becoming ordained as a nun by the Bishop of Ardagh. She founded a religious community in the shadow of a great oak tree, calling it the Church of the Oak, a new name influenced by the faith she was born into, the faith of the Oak Sages, the Druids. Such was Brighid's ability to heal, such was the compassion that flowed from her heart, that when a century after she died, she was named a saint. The holy wells of the goddess Brighid became the holy wells of Saint Brighid. The festival of Imbolc on the 1st of February, which had always been sacred to the goddess Brighid, was now St. Brigid's Day. Goddess and saint, human and divine, merged into memory and the understanding of the people, and as St. Brighid aged, she aged with the slow turning of the earth, so that in her youth she was like the warm spring, appearing first in the dawning of the year and in February, then dancing to the tuning of spring into summer at Beltane. As her youth turned to middle age, she became known as the Mother of Souls, some even calling her foster mother to Christ. As the summer of her life turned to autumn, she moved from Beltane and high summer to the time of Lammas, of Lunasa, when the harvest was gathered in the golden cornfields, matching the golden colour of her hair, which even then shone as brightly in the summer as it had when she was a maiden. Then, as harvest time became autumn, so Brighid became the healer of souls, the wise woman, and as the midwife helped others give birth to the children of their love and of their Creator's spirits, until, as winter stalked the land at Samhain, Brighid at last became the old woman, the crone, the Cailleach. Finally, in the year 525 AD, surrounded by her devoted followers, St. Brighid passed away, journeying to the other world, perhaps to meet not only the Christ to whom she had devoted her life, but the goddess Brighid, with whose name and spirit she was forever linked. And that's enough from me, so I'll bid you farewell. Goodbye from Baron Claude Voltaire. Beg your pardon, forgetting my own name. Baron Claude Voltaire. And I'll see you next time. A great and blessed Imbolc to you all.